Hey, Mike Zorns, also known as the Political Otter, coming to you from Mississauga, Ontario. And today we're going to talk a little bit about green energy. We're a few days out still from the announcement that Mark Carney is going to make about what his new cabinet is going to be. And we're still a couple of weeks until the throne speech where we actually know what the government priorities are going to look like. So because Carney has such a strong reputation as being for green energy, I thought it was really important to talk about what the state of green energy looks like in Canada, because it's unique in the world. Talk a little bit about what some future policies I'm going to be looking towards are going to look like based on an understanding of what green energy probably makes a lot of sense within Canada and what green energy may not make sense in Canada, so that we've got a base on which to better understand and better evaluate if the policies going forward are actually going to be beneficial to us or not. Okay, so let's get started and talk a little bit about the current state. Canada is outrageously blessed when it comes to natural water resources. This includes river systems and particularly unnavigable river systems, which means we have higher capacity than almost anywhere else in the world to do hydroelectric energy. Basically, you build a dam, you put a bunch of turbines in it, you use the kinetic motion of the and energy of the water flowing through the dam to turn the turbines, which creates the energy. This is the single largest way in which Canada produces energy. The percentage of energy that comes from that in every province looks a little bit different, but average out across the board, it's roughly 70% of what we do. The three provinces that benefit the most from this are BC, Ontario, and Quebec. Quebec, in particular, over 90% of its energy production is from renewable resources, disproportionately from hydro over anything else. BC, Ontario, also great winners on this. All three provinces produce so much hydro that we don't just do internal consumption with it. It is also a major Canadian export to the US. Canada helps the US grid look a lot cleaner than it naturally and really is. So that is the number one energy source that we see within Canada as a whole. For obvious reasons, Alberta and Saskatchewan are a little less blessed when it comes to hydro energy, so we definitely see them going other routes in other directions. Now, what does this mean for the future and where we're going? There's three major technologies that we'll probably see being promoted and discussed as Canada figures out what its green policy is going to be moving forward. Number one with those is solar. All right, we got to have a real talk about solar efficiency here. Canada, not a good candidate for solar. Despite how beautiful blue day it is behind me, there is a plain and simple reality that even the most southern part of Canada, 4 to 6 months of the year, does not get enough hours of sunshine for it to be an economically viable proposition to do solar, which is probably why solar accounts for like 0.06% of our total energy production in this country. You add to that most of the areas that are a little bit further south, like where I am in the GTA here right now, have some of the densest and heaviest atmosphere in the entirety of the country, which means it's a magnitude of anywhere, depending on whose math you like, anywhere from 5 to 8 times less effective doing solar here than, say, somewhere where you have thin atmosphere, very little cloud coverage, almost no smog or pollution, and direct light for close to 12 hours a day every day, like the Sunbelt in the US, say around Texas. So, solar Canada, really, really difficult proposition. Really hate to have to break that one to all the environmentalists, but it's a reality. The amount of carbon footprint that is created just to get the minerals out of the ground to build a solar panel. That solar panel, if you're putting it in somewhere in Canada, is probably never going to actually offset the carbon footprint that it took to produce it. So I don't like the math on solar for Canada. What I do really like the math for is the next two, and the first is wind. Tons of open country in Canada, amazing amount of space that we have here. Once again, one of our natural advantages. And you add into that the fact that the wind is pretty consistent and heavily consistent across the entirety of the country. We're blessed with being right in the middle of a major jet stream that creates a lot of very great wind weather for us. We have the Great Lakes region where all the different lakes create their own microclimates, all of which compete with each other, all of which create tremendous storms, tons and tons of wind activity and energy. You have amazing consistent wind in the prairies thanks to the way in which the Pacific Ocean currents go up and then back down the Rocky Mountains. Used to live in Calgary, where we experience this phenomenon known as the Chinook. So Canada, amazing place for wind. The challenge with wind is how expensive it is to do when you compare it to upfront, when you compare it to traditional energy resources. So if you take something like a coal burning plant or a natural gas burning plant, roughly about 30 to 40% of the total lifetime cost is the upfront cost to build. The rest of the cost is then the imports over time, which are typically offsets by the profits of spinning a turbine and making the money. So with wind, it's a little bit of a different challenge because 100% of the cost is the upfront cost in building, well, like 98%, and then 2% is the lifetime maintenance of it. And then it's 100% the wind generation after. So because we're upfronting so much more on big, huge commercial scales, genuinely moving the needle wind farms, it's a little bit of a tougher proposition for the market. It's a different risk. So I think in order for Canada to do this well, our governments are definitely going to have to incentivize it. Again, in Ontario, we've seen provincially some of that happen. We have seen some federal changes that have helped incentivize this. And there is a challenge that where people live aren't always the windiest parts of the country. So we do have to do some major upgrades to the transportation infrastructure to actually get the energy from where it's being created to where people live. All of this is going to take forward thinking policy. The other area that's really interesting, and Ontario has been a little bit ahead of the curve on this, especially because our premier just announced some incentives to continue to encourage this, is the emerging technology in nuclear around mini reactors. So mini reactors basically take the best parts of a nuclear power plant without the worst parts like the major meltdown problems and the incredible amount of nuclear waste that takes several hundred years to properly cool back down, and basically puts high producing energy into something that can be transported on already existing transportation lines. So this means when we know we've got a heat wave coming to somewhere like Toronto, we can get one of these mini reactors in place at a traditional coal or gas generating power plant, moving the turbines, creating the additional energy that's needed for the spikes for when it's 45 degrees here and everybody's got their AC on. This again is emerging technology. There's some interesting challenges around it, but I do think this is something that can be hugely influential for a country like Canada that has so many diverse climates, such a spread out population, and really needs to ensure that as we continue to rely on a little more solar and a little more wind, that we have things that can absorb some of the inconsistencies that go along with that. Okay, final piece. There's a place for natural gas in a mostly green grid. If you saw the outages that happened in Spain recently, which is one of the greenest grids in the entirety of the world, um, area of the world blessed with amazing solar. It's an area where the economics of solar make a lot of sense. They've invested heavily, heavily, heavily in solar. One of the things about the direct current that comes from that is that you no longer have turbines spinning that can absorb what's called wobbles, which are basically variations in the current. That's what caused the outage. I'm oversimplifying. You can look up the deep, deep engineering behind why all of that is so on your own. But in simple one sentence, that's what happened. A really interesting thing about natural gas plants as compared to any other fossil fuel, they still burning natural gas still has the lowest carbon footprint. Coal has the highest, and everything else is somewhere in between. But with natural gas having the lowest, it's also the fastest and the easiest to spin up. A natural gas plant can be spun up in under 30 and brought back offline in under 30 minutes. Spun up in under 30, brought offline in under 30. So it can really be a powerful tool for if something goes wrong, or for if the grid is being taxed and actually needs some more traditional sources in order to offset the challenges that are coming from direct currents like solar, like wind, like some of these other ones. Now, in Canada, it's a little less of a problem than what we saw on the Iberian Peninsula because so much of what we do is hydro and we do have those turbines to absorb. But places that aren't quite as blessed, like Alberta, Saskatchewan, most of the territories, that there is still probably going to have to be a place for natural gas in a mostly green grid. So these are at least what I'm going to be looking for as the types of goals that I'm hoping we'll see are the policies from the new government. One of the things I really like about Carney, and especially after reading his book, is I think he's somebody who really understands the dilemmas and the positives and the negatives of all of this, unlike his predecessor, who I always felt was more just about the virtual signaling of green as opposed to the economics of green. Anyway, if you want to understand the economics behind what is and isn't going to work in Canada, this is a really brief overview, but these are the goals that I'm going to be looking towards from the policies that are going to come out of the throne speech. Can't wait to see how close we get. Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye.